English translation. 500th contact, Wednesday, 25th August 2010, 14 hours.
You are already waiting. Greetings and welcome, dear friend.
You are not late, for we have arranged for 14 dear Schroeders. Greetings also to you, dear friend.
With your permission, I would like to start with these sheets here, which I would like you to read first, and then tell me what you have to say about them. This is important. There have been some misunderstandings about this matter, which have been cleared up in the meantime, but what is written here, for example, by H, who wants to become president of the national group. I am not one of those human beings who blindly follow a directive. Even if it comes from Billy, that is what I find all sorts of things. Because when directives are given by the association, they are based on our statutes and articles of association. Surely it is not acceptable that they are not followed. If we in the core group were not to take strict care to act exactly according to the statutes and bylaws, then we would not be as far as FIGU is today. To follow the directives respectively, articles of the statutes and bylaws is necessary if everything is to take its correct course. But if the instructions are not followed, then everything, or at least a lot of things, is doomed to failure.
Let me read. If a person who aspires to the office of president in a national group writes something like what is written here, then it should be clear to me that this person is deliberately violating the statutes and bylaws and is not suitable for an office as president of a national group. Because it would be clear from the outset that if such a presidency existed, the group would not be able to function in terms of order. A presidency must be ruled out for H in advance, because these words alone disqualify him as the group's leading persons in the form of a president.
That's also what I said, but not just for the reason that it is written here, because there is one other thing, and that is, H has succeeded in getting a meeting place in the group to rent a room from a group member who charges €60 for it. In addition, H insisted that 2 people in the group should move out of their own house and take over a house manager's position. That's more or less what I was told. And also I think that this is not in accordance with the FIGU. I think that the property management is a coercion that should not be done by any member of the group, and especially not by any persons who want to become the president of the group. And with regard to the rented premises, I find that it is not up to FIGU members to charge group members for a meeting room. Everyone is in the same boat, which means that everyone is working with and for each other, and therefore is not out to harm the members financially, which is actually true in this case. In addition, the group has the possibility to use a suitable meeting room in an inn for a total of €50 in exchange for a consumption obligation, as has always been the case with FIGU.
What you say further proves to me that H is not suitable as group president. He acts arbitrarily, arrogantly, selfishly, compulsively, and obviously imperious and suggestive with regard to the group members concerning his desires, ideas, and wishes. Furthermore, it is clear from this that he has not understood the meaning of the FIGU regulations concerning the statutes and bylaws. If the national group is really to come into being, which seems to me to be more and more questionable, then H must under no circumstances be involved in a leading office. And what I still want to say regarding everything that Bernadette wrote to him according to these sheets. Everything is correct. If mistakes have been made with regard to some things, then this is to be understood and not to turn a blind eye to them, as is sometimes said by Earth humans, when misunderstandings, etc. occur.
I am comforted. But it is simply not to be understood that certain human beings always immediately seize power and want to turn everything around in their own way when they sense an opportunity to do so, even when they cannot see things clearly and cannot judge things in the correct sense. Everyone always wants to be the greatest and to rule over all others. instead of putting themselves on the same level with everyone else and discussing everything with each other in a harmonious, correct, and pertinent way, and then deciding on it together. And this must be done without power-hungry people suggestively influencing, persuading, or forcing others to make any decisions.
Unfortunately, this evil of wanting to rule prevails among the majority of Earth humans, which is why they do not want to place themselves in a general and appropriate order, nor in laws and recommendations that would be suitable for creating peace, freedom, and harmony, as you repeatedly point out in your explanations.
Unfortunately, this is indeed the case, and the worst are those domineers who, in politics and the military, in terrorist organizations and in religions and sects, commit their humanity criminal mischief, start wars, commit murders, wreak havoc, torture, rape, and bring unspeakable suffering to human beings in the name of love, freedom, peace, and justice. This also applies to the death penalty, which is a crime against humanity and is used by states such as the USA, etc., when war criminals or murderers are executed by law. Any exercise of the death penalty is basically a crime against humanity, but that is not what the death penalty criers care about. And you would not believe that even in Switzerland we have such criminal elements crying out for the death penalty, as was shown on television just yesterday, when in fact a group of moronic idiots demanded that the death penalty be reintroduced. That the reintroduction of this despicable method of torture and punishment would bring about a return to the methods of the Dark Middle Ages that were so contemptuous of humanity does not seem to be clear to these imbecilic idiots who are demanding the death penalty. It is true that those who yesterday called for legally enshrined murder via television, etc., have today, on the midday news, again distanced themselves from their monstrously inhumane and inhumane request, and stated that their demand was only a shot across the bow to make people think that the lame penal system must be tightened up again. This slimy and evil-smelling excuse was probably brought forward because it was obviously recognized that her inhuman and unjust demands would have pushed her into social marginalization. But one has to ask oneself how primitive, degenerate, justice and misanthropic morons must be who want to reintroduce a death penalty that was once abolished out of humanity and justice. In my opinion, such a request no longer contains any rational power, not to mention any lack of reason, any social thought, or any lack of value with regard to a humane and harmonious form of society. The mere cry for capital punishment shows whose spirit child is a human being who demands such legally legalized murder. The very thought of it should be punishable by law and punished by law, for there is probably nothing more unlawful and inhumane than torturing human beings and handing them over to death. No human being has the right to torture the body of another human being or to deny him the right to his life. And this must also not be different by a humanly determined law. But if a human being nevertheless demands torture and the death penalty, he proves with it that he has neither understood the meaning of life nor is a valuable member of society. Society is not calling for torture and the death penalty, but for social cohesion, cohabitation, and cooperation. Anyone who demands torture or the death penalty, the mere threat of the death penalty, and a conviction to that effect is equivalent to torture, openly reveals his degenerate world of thoughts and feelings and his miserable and filthy character. And how the psychopathically demolished and in the swamp of his own cowardice and his own uselessness degenerated personality looks like, that can probably not be described at all.
Your words are harsh but fair, so I can only agree with them. And if I am to say one more word about this, I will cite the absurdity of the fact that, as you have said, earthly military and civil courts do indeed sit in judgment on criminals, sentencing them to death and executing them for war crimes, etc., in relation to crimes against humanity. But the fact that the judges and condemners and those exercising the death penalty act in the same way as criminals with regard to crimes against humanity is completely ignored. Thus, the judges, condemners, and executioners take the right to commit crimes against humanity themselves without being held responsible for them. And as you say, the mere thought of demanding a death penalty should be punishable. In fact, however, the very idea of demanding the death penalty should be punishable, for this alone is a contempt for life and is completely unworthy of human beings and without rights, as is also the case with acts of war, terrorism, and religious and sectarian acts of murder in any form.
Thanks, your words do me good. It would be desirable that here on Earth your legislation could prevail, as well as the consciousness of your peoples, who in their world of thought and feeling do not cultivate the madness of wars, murders, crimes, nor religious and sectarian stupidity and the fanaticism that results from it, as is the case with the human beings of Earth.
The time is still very far in the future when the laws of the Earth humans will be aligned with the creative and naturally given laws and recommendations. But now we have to turn to our real task concerning the corrections of the Talmud Emmanuel, where we also have to receive instructions from the level of Arahat Athersata in order to correct the mistakes and omissions of Isa Rashid in the translation. As usual, everything is to be recorded immediately in the computer.
Naturally, we will do it the way we have done it so far.